On a sunny afternoon, FBI agent Alicia Carter was ready to unwind after a long week, eager to enjoy her day off at her favorite cafe. But her moment of peace quickly turned into a nightmare when a local police officer approached her with suspicion, falsely accusing her of loitering. Despite her calm demeanor and insistence on her rights, Alicia found herself facing a deeply unsettling confrontation, one that exposed the harsh realities of racial profiling and the abuse of power. As tensions rose in the cafe, Alicia's determination to stand her ground transformed into a powerful resolve to seek justice, not just for herself, but for all who have suffered under the same injustice. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell to avoid missing any videos. It was a beautiful, sunny afternoon, with a clear blue sky that hinted at the perfect day ahead. Alicia Carter had just emerged from a lengthy and exhausting meeting with her FBI team. As one of the youngest African-American agents in the Bureau, Alicia navigated a challenging path to reach her current position. She had proven herself time and again, demonstrating unparalleled skills in a criminal investigation that set her apart from her peers. But today, however, was not about work. She was officially off the clock, dressed casually in a comfortable pair of jeans, a simple plain t-shirt, and a well-worn baseball cap. Alicia was eager to enjoy her much-deserved day off. All she wanted was to grab a coffee, unwind, and relax in her favorite spot at the nearby park, away from the pressures of her job. As she pulled into the parking lot of a quaint little cafe, she appreciated the neighborhood's charm, a peaceful blend of suburban tranquility and small-town warmth. After parking her car, she grabbed her phone and wallet, locking the door behind her with a satisfying click as she strolled toward the cafe's entrance. The door chimed cheerfully as she stepped inside, instantly greeted by the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soothing murmur of fellow patrons enjoying their leisurely afternoon. Making her way to the counter, she ordered a caramel latte, the sweet scent of which only heightened her anticipation of a relaxing afternoon. After receiving her drink, she sought out a cozy seat by the window. From this vantage point, she could watch the world go by, the families strolling along the sidewalk, children laughing and playing, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the warm breeze. Alicia smiled to herself, taking a moment to savor the calm before diving into a book she had been meaning to read. About 10 minutes passed, and Alicia had barely sipped her latte when she noticed a police car pull into the parking lot. Initially, she didn't pay much attention to it. After all, it was just another officer likely taking a break from the day's duties. But her gaze was drawn back to the vehicle when she saw the officer step out. He was a tall, stocky white man with a stern expression etched on his face, and for some reason, his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than seemed appropriate. The officer made his way into the cafe, his heavy boots echoing ominously against the wooden floor. Alicia felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere around her, the other customers now watching with quiet curiosity as the officer approached her table. He stopped right in front of her, hands planted firmly on his hips, his expression serious and unyielding. "Ma'am," he began, his tone making it clear that this was no casual conversation. "Can I see some ID?" Alicia's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but she remained calm. She was accustomed to navigating tense situations, given her work in law enforcement. Still, a flicker of confusion crossed her mind. Why was she being singled out? "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice steady and polite, though she could feel her heart rate quickening. The officer's gaze traveled over her casual attire, his eyes narrowing slightly in suspicion. "I've had some complaints about someone matching your description loitering in this area." A wave of disbelief washed over Alicia. Loitering? She was simply sitting in a cafe, minding her own business like everyone else around her. She glanced at the other patrons, who were now watching intently, and her stomach twisted in knots. Was this happening? "I'm just having a coffee," she responded, striving to keep her tone neutral. "Is there a reason you're asking me for ID?" The officer's eyes hardened, his expression unyielding. "Are you refusing to cooperate, ma'am?" Alicia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wasn't in the mood for a confrontation, but she wasn't about to let herself be intimidated either. This was absurd. "No, I'm not refusing," she replied, her voice firm. But I would like to know why you are targeting me when I'm not doing anything wrong." The officer's jaw tightened, and he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if to intimidate her further. "Look, you can make this easy, or you can make this difficult. But I'm going to need to see some identification now." Alicia sighed internally and reached for her wallet, pulling out her driver's license. She handed it to him, watching closely as he glanced at it with a dismissive air, hardly taking the time to read the details. Instead, he returned it with a smirk that sent a chill down her spine. "You from around here?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Does it matter?" she shot back, her patience beginning to fray. The officer's expression darkened, his irritation palpable. "Watch your tone," he snapped, the edge in his voice, making it clear that he expected compliance. "Just answer the question." Alicia felt her temper flare, but fought to keep herself composed. This was not the time to lose control. She understood exactly what was happening here. He didn't see a law-abiding citizen enjoying a peaceful afternoon. He saw a black woman who, in his eyes, didn't belong there. Before she could formulate a response, the officer took a step back, his hand moving toward his radio. "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone in the cafe to hear, drawing even more attention to their escalating confrontation. Alicia stared at him in disbelief. "Come with you? For what? I haven't done anything wrong." His indifference to her protest was striking. "We can sort it out down at the station," he replied, his tone cold and unyielding, leaving Alicia feeling trapped in a situation that felt increasingly unjust. The cafe had descended into an uneasy silence, the lively chatter and clinking of cups replaced by a palpable tension as every pair of eyes became fixed on the dramatic scene unfolding before them. Alicia felt her heart race, each thump echoing the surge of anger that began to bubble up inside her. She had faced similar situations before, subtle racism and assumptions made about her based solely on her appearance. But this was something entirely different. This was deeply humiliating, and the fact that it was happening in front of a crowd made it all the more unbearable. As she took a deep breath, attempting to steady herself, Alicia reminded herself that she was more than capable of handling this confrontation. Yet, she was acutely aware of the need to tread carefully. The last thing she wanted was for this situation to escalate into something uncontrollable. The cafe patrons, some with sympathy in their eyes, others simply curious, had fallen into a hushed stillness, leaving her to bear the weight of this moment alone. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. "I'm not going anywhere," she declared firmly, her voice steady as she stood her ground. "Unless you have a legitimate reason to detain me, I intend to finish my coffee and leave on my terms." Her words were met with a flash of anger that colored the officer's face, and he stepped closer, his imposing posture radiating intimidation. "I'm not asking, ma'am. I'm telling," he replied, his tone dripping with authority. Alicia felt a twitch in her fingers, a physical manifestation of the tension coiling within her. But she remained calm. This confrontation was far from over, not by a long shot. "Officer," she said, her voice low but imbued with strength, "you have no idea who you're dealing with." The pulse quickened in her veins as the officer squared up to her, his eyes narrowing with a mix of frustration and arrogance. He had no understanding of her background or the power she wielded, a knowledge that simmered beneath her composed exterior. But this wasn't the moment to reveal her hand. She understood the crucial value of patience, having spent years mastering it in encounters just like this. The officer leaned in, his face inches from hers, the smugness in his voice heightening her resolve. "You can either come quietly, or I can make this very difficult for you. Your choice." A few customers shifted uneasily in their seats, some wide-eyed, others looking away, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. Alicia couldn't help but notice the silence enveloping her. It was as if the weight of their inaction pressed down on her, making her feel utterly alone in this moment, facing a man who believed he held all the power. Having worked in the FBI long enough, Alicia knew that one wrong move could send this situation spiraling out of control. Yet, she was determined not to back down. Keeping her voice measured and calm, she pressed on. "Officer, I'm not going anywhere with you unless you tell me what crime I'm being accused of. You have no legitimate grounds to take me in." The officer's eyes narrowed, a clear sign of his growing irritation. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially not by someone he dismissed as beneath him. Alicia could see it reflected in his posture. His chest puffed out slightly more, his fingers twitching near his holster, revealing his agitation. But she refused to give him the satisfaction of losing her composure. "You're resisting an officer," he accused, his voice rising in volume. "That's enough of a reason for me." Resisting? Alicia thought incredulously. She hadn't even stood from her seat. She was simply sitting in a cafe, minding her own business. And now, this man wanted to haul her off to the back of his patrol car without a shred of valid reasoning. Clenching her fists beneath the table, she felt the heat of her anger simmering just below the surface, yet she knew better than to let it spill over. Just as she prepared to respond, the officer's radio crackled to life, cutting through the tension in the air. He grabbed the device from his shoulder, pressing it to his ear as another voice crackled through the static. Alicia couldn't make out the words, but she noticed a slight shift in the officer's expression, as if he were weighing a decision in his mind. He glanced back at her, clearly torn about his next move. The silence between them stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable, as he listened intently to the radio. Seizing the moment, Alicia scanned her surroundings, taking in the expressions of those around her. The onlookers' curiosity had shifted to discomfort, their faces reflecting the tension that filled the room. The cafe staff, usually warm and chatty, had fallen silent behind the counter, exchanging anxious glances as they tried to navigate the escalating situation unfolding just a few feet away. After a few tense moments, the officer finally lowered his radio, his eyes locking onto Alicia's with an intensity that made her heart race. The same smugness returned to his expression, and in that moment, Alicia understood that he wasn't about to back down easily. He leaned closer, a smirk dancing on his lips as he spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "Looks like you're in luck," he said, the mockery evident in his tone. "I've got another call to respond to, but don't think this is over. I'll be keeping my eye on you." With that, he turned sharply on his heel, his heavy boots thudding against the floor as he marched out of the cafe. Alicia couldn't shake the feeling of dread as she watched him stride toward his patrol car, each stomp echoing in her mind like a warning. When he climbed inside and started the engine, the sound of sirens pierced the air, fading into the distance as the officer drove away, disappearing around the corner. Alicia released a long, slow breath, the tension in the cafe still palpable. Although the immediate confrontation had ended, the atmosphere felt thick with unease. After a few moments, the hushed conversations around her began to resume, albeit much quieter than before. She could still feel the weight of the stares from the other customers. Some gazed at her with pity, others with discomfort, but none dared to speak a word during the entire interaction. It was a deafening silence that lingered in the air. Taking a sip of her now lukewarm coffee, Alicia felt her hands tremble slightly, betraying the fury that churned within her. She wasn't afraid, that wasn't it at all. No, she was angry, furious even, a burning fire igniting inside her. But she also knew that maintaining her composure was essential. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered such blatant disrespect, and, regrettably, it likely wouldn't be the last. Yet, that didn't mean she would simply let it slide. Too many times before, it had never been just about one man with a badge. It was about a system that allowed individuals like him to act with impunity, wielding their power over those they deemed less worthy. Her fingers drummed rhythmically against the table as she mulled over her options. She wasn't going to let this incident go unnoticed, but she also understood the importance of being strategic in her response. The situation extended beyond her personal experience. It represented countless others who had been mistreated, humiliated, or, worse, harmed because of the unchecked authority this officer wielded. Before she could dive deeper into her thoughts, the cafe door swung open abruptly. Alicia's heart raced for a moment, anticipating the return of the officer. However, a familiar figure stepped through the threshold instead. It was her colleague, Agent Stevens. His tall, lean frame was unmistakable, and as soon as he caught sight of Alicia, he made a beeline for her table. Pulling out the chair across from her, he sat down with a concerned expression etched on his face. "I got your text. What happened?" he asked, his voice laced with urgency. Alicia leaned back in her seat, her fingers wrapping around the now warm cup of coffee as she prepared to share the details. She hesitated, reluctant to relive the encounter, but she knew Stevens needed to understand the gravity of the situation. "I had a run-in with a local cop," she replied, her voice steady yet strained. "He tried to arrest me for no reason at all." Stevens' eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Wait, what? Why didn't you flash your badge? That should have cleared everything up." Alicia sighed, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "Because it wouldn't have made a difference. He didn't care who I was or what my credentials were. He just saw what he wanted to see, and that was all that mattered to him." Stevens shook his head, frustration evident on his face. "This is getting completely out of hand. We can't let this slide. What's your plan moving forward?" Alicia thought for a moment, her gaze drifting out the cafe window. She observed the people passing by, each engrossed in their own lives, blissfully unaware of the confrontation she had just endured. The officer may have vanished from view, but his oppressive presence still lingered in her mind, like a shadow refusing to dissipate. "I'm not entirely sure yet," she said finally, her voice firm but contemplative, "but I know I need to take action. I can't just let him get away with this. It's time to stand up and ensure that this behavior doesn't continue unchecked." Stevens nodded thoughtfully, a serious expression settling on his face. "Alicia, this isn't just about you. This situation could very well be affecting other people, perhaps those who lack the resources or support to fight back against someone like him." Alicia lowered her gaze, the weight of his words settling heavily in her chest. "I know," she replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what bothers me the most." The silence that enveloped them grew thick with unspoken thoughts as both agents contemplated the gravity of the situation they faced. Stevens, feeling the tension, cleared his throat in an attempt to break the oppressive quiet. "We've got that significant case briefing later this afternoon," he said, trying to shift the direction of their conversation. "But if you need some time to deal with this, I can't take over the responsibilities for now." Alicia shook her head resolutely, her expression firm. "No, I'll be there. This situation is important, but so is the case we've been working on. I can't allow this personal issue to distract me from my job, especially when it requires my full attention." Stevens leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to a softer, more supportive tone. "Just remember not to lose sight of what truly matters. We're a team, and we've got your back if you need anything." Alicia managed a small smile of appreciation in response, but inside, her mind was already racing with conflicting thoughts. Stevens was right. She needed to stay focused on the task at hand. Yet, she couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling of what had just occurred. She wasn't the kind of person to simply brush things under the rug. The actions of that officer had crossed a line that she could not ignore. Stevens glanced at his watch and let out a soft sigh. "I should head back to the office. Are you going to be okay here on your own?" "Yeah," Alicia replied, determination creeping back into her voice. "I'll catch up with you in a bit." With that, Stevens stood, offering her a reassuring nod before he exited the cafe. Alicia watched him leave, then turned her attention back to the bustling street outside. She felt a surge of urgency rising within her. She had a decision to make. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Part of her felt compelled to track down that officer and confront him directly, to demand accountability for his actions. However, she recognized that a confrontation wouldn't lead to any real change. This issue was much larger than a single face-to-face encounter. If she genuinely wanted to effect meaningful change, she would have to navigate the proper channels. Just then, her phone buzzed again, breaking her train of thought. It was a notification from the FBI's internal system, reminding her about the case briefing scheduled for later that afternoon. Alicia had been deeply involved in a high-profile investigation for weeks, and the team was finally prepared to present their findings. She realized she couldn't afford to let personal matters distract her now, especially when so much was at stake for everyone involved. But despite her efforts to refocus on work, the officer's face kept flashing in her mind. His smug expression, the condescending way he had treated her as if she were insignificant. It was a memory that was hard to shake. Alicia understood that this situation transcended her personal feelings. It was about standing up for what was right, even when the path ahead felt daunting and uncertain. She glanced at her watch, noting that she still had some time before the briefing. An idea began to form in her mind, and she knew exactly what she needed to do. With newfound resolve, Alicia stood up, slipped on her coat, and walked out of the cafe. The cool breeze greeted her, refreshing her senses and grounding her in the present moment as she made her way down the bustling street. Though she didn't have a detailed plan yet, she was clear on where to begin. First and foremost, she needed to gather information. Alicia had encountered numerous officers throughout her career, some commendable, others far from it, and she was well versed in how to navigate the system effectively to achieve the outcomes she desired. As she walked, her thoughts drifted back to her rigorous training with the FBI. One of the most crucial lessons she learned was how to maneuver through challenging situations without allowing her emotions to dictate her actions. Now, more than ever, she couldn't let her anger cloud her judgment. This situation demanded careful handling, precision, and a well-thought-out strategy. With a determined stride, Alicia made her way to the local police precinct, each step echoing her unwavering resolve. If she was going to initiate a meaningful course of action, this was the essential starting point. She had no intention of creating a spectacle or confronting the officer directly. Not yet, anyway, but she needed to gather critical information first. The weight of her experience propelled her forward, each heartbeat syncing with her purpose. As she approached the precinct, a renewed sense of purpose coursed through her veins. This was about more than just her own experience. It was about ensuring that no one else would have to endure the same injustice she had faced. She felt a profound sense of responsibility, not only for herself but for the community that might be affected by Officer Donnelly's unchecked behavior. The fire within her ignited, fueling her determination. Alicia pushed open the heavy door, stepping into the precinct's bustling interior, ready to embark on the next phase of her plan. The moment she crossed the threshold, the cool air brushed against her face, momentarily refreshing her resolve, but also prompting a brief hesitation. Although this wasn't her first encounter with a police precinct, today felt uniquely significant. She wasn't here as an FBI agent, not yet. At this moment, she was just a citizen who had been wronged by someone sworn to protect her. Her badge, typically a source of authority, remained tucked away, a silent reminder of her dual identity and the complexities of her current situation. Taking a deep breath, Alicia stepped further inside and immediately sensed a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The precinct buzzed with frenetic energy, officers moving purposefully between desks, phones ringing incessantly, and the hum of overlapping conversations creating a chaotic yet familiar backdrop. She scanned the room, searching for someone who might assist her without drawing too much attention. She was determined not to create a scene. However, she refused to let the officer's misconduct go unchallenged. At the front desk sat a middle-aged woman with sharp, assessing eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Alicia on guard. The woman's posture was confident, arms crossed in a way that conveyed both authority and reluctance to engage. Alicia approached her with calm confidence, striving to maintain a professional yet assertive demeanor. "Excuse me," Alicia began, her voice steady and controlled as she caught the woman's attention. "I need some information regarding one of your officers." The woman raised an eyebrow, her gaze sweeping up and down as if assessing Alicia's credibility. "And who might you be?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism as if questioning Alicia's right to inquire. Alicia responded with a polite smile that concealed her urgency, keeping her emotions in check. "Just someone seeking information. I had an encounter earlier today with one of your officers, and I'd like to follow up on it." Leaning back in her chair, the woman crossed her arms more tightly, her expression betraying a mix of curiosity and annoyance. "And what kind of encounter are we discussing?" she asked, her tone suggestive of her reluctance to get involved in what could be a drawn-out issue. Alicia's composure remained unshaken despite the scrutiny. An unprofessional one, she replied, her voice firm yet measured. I'd prefer not to divulge too many details here. I simply need to know the officer's name. The woman scrutinized her for a moment, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly before she sighed and turned her attention to the computer screen. All right, what time did this supposed encounter take place, and where? It was earlier this afternoon, just outside of Jefferson Park, Alicia replied, her voice steady. She provided a brief yet vivid description of the officer. His tall, stocky frame, a shaved head that glistened under the sun, and an attitude that oozed arrogance and entitlement. The memories of the encounter flashed in her mind, fueling her determination to hold him accountable. The woman's fingers clacked rhythmically across the keyboard, and after a moment, she paused to glance back at Alicia, a slight frown etching her features. You're referring to Officer Donnelly, she stated, her voice flat but tinged with a hint of irritation. He's been with the department for a few years now. Alicia nodded, committing the name to memory with a quiet sense of victory. Officer Donnelly. Now she had a concrete lead to pursue, a name that could potentially unlock a series of investigations. Thank you for your assistance, she said, her tone calm but filled with gratitude that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside her. The woman offered a half-hearted nod, her attention drifting back to the computer screen as if eager to dismiss the interaction. Alicia didn't linger. She had gathered what she needed for the time being, and remaining in the precinct wouldn't serve her purpose any further. As she stepped back into the daylight, Alicia's mind was already churning with thoughts, dissecting the information she had just obtained. Officer Donnelly. She knew she could access his records through the FBI's internal system, but for now, she had enough pieces to start assembling the bigger picture. If this officer had behaved unprofessionally with her, it was likely he had done so before, perhaps even to others who lacked the means or courage to stand up for themselves. With each step away from the precinct, her resolve solidified. She wouldn't let this issue fade away into the background. She would ensure that Officer Donnelly's actions were brought to light. There were stories to uncover and injustices to address, and perhaps, in her pursuit of the truth, she could make a difference not just for herself, but for those who had been silenced by fear. The journey ahead would be challenging, but Alicia was ready to face it head-on. Alicia headed toward her car, parked a few blocks away. The street was relatively quiet, a few people walking their dogs, a couple of kids riding bikes, but her thoughts were laser-focused. She needed to ensure her next steps were calculated. This wasn't just about reporting a bad cop. It was about holding someone accountable for their actions and preventing it from happening again. Once inside her car, Alicia pulled out her phone and dialed Stevens. He picked up after the second ring. You get what you needed? His voice was steady, a reassuring presence amid her swirling thoughts. Yeah, Alicia said, her resolve hardening. Officer Donnelly. You ever hear about him? Stevens hesitated for a moment. Yeah, I've heard things. He's one of those types. Not much of a surprise. Alicia smirked slightly. Oh, I know, but I'm not backing down. Didn't think you would, Stevens chuckled. Just keep me in the loop. Will do, she replied before hanging up. As she put her phone away, Alicia leaned back in her seat for a moment, letting out a long breath. The frustration from earlier simmered beneath the surface, but now she had a direction. This wasn't just about how Donnelly had treated her. It was about the bigger picture, the fact that someone like him could wear a badge and feel justified in acting however he wanted. Alicia understood the system all too well. She had seen both sides of the law during her time with the FBI. There were officers genuinely dedicated to their communities, treating people with respect and upholding justice. But there were others, like Donnelly, who wielded their power to belittle and mistreat. That was something she refused to stand by and watch. The drive back to the FBI field office was relatively short, yet it provided her with precious time to organize her thoughts. By the time she pulled into the parking lot, she had a clearer sense of what she needed to do next. First, she would check Donnelly's record. If there were any complaints or incidents in his file, it would give her more leverage to confront his behavior. As she stepped into the cool, sterile environment of the field office, Alicia made her way to her desk, her determination solidifying with each step. She logged into her computer, and quickly navigated through the system to access local law enforcement records. It didn't take long to find Officer Donnelly's file. Her eyes scanned the screen, noting the usual details, his years of service and commendations. But then she spotted something that made her pause. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. A few complaints were logged, mostly minor, but enough to raise a red flag. They were from civilians, detailing Donnelly's abrasive attitude, rough handling during arrests, and blatant disregard for basic respect. Alicia frowned as she noted that nothing had come of these complaints. They were all marked as resolved with no further action taken. This was exactly what she had expected. It wasn't just about one bad day. Donnelly had a pattern, and the system had let it slide. Well, not anymore, she thought. This time, things were going to be different. The following morning, Alicia arrived at the FBI office well before dawn, her determination fueling her steps. The office was still quiet, but her mind buzzed with the events of the previous day. Officer Donnelly's contemptuous behavior had etched itself into her memory, and she was resolute in her mission to bring his actions to light. She had encountered officers like him before, individuals who wielded their badges like weapons, believing that authority granted them the right to belittle and disrespect those around them. But Alicia was not just another civilian. She was an FBI agent, armed with the resources and authority to uncover the truth. As she settled into her desk, the soft glow of her laptop screen illuminated her face. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the investigation ahead. The gravity of the task loomed over her. It wasn't merely about her personal experience, but about the countless others who had suffered at Donnelly's hands. She knew that building a compelling case was essential, not just for her sense of justice, but for every victim who had faced his abuse of power. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed the FBI's internal database, meticulously sifting through records not just limited to Donnelly's precinct but extending throughout the entire district. With each click, her unease grew as she uncovered a troubling pattern. Over the past 2 years, numerous complaints had been lodged against Officer Donnelly, predominantly from individuals of color who detailed incidents of mistreatment during traffic stops and casual encounters. Each complaint had been dismissed or deemed unsubstantiated, as if the victims' voices held no weight against the authority of the badge. Alicia's jaw clenched in frustration. It was a disheartening yet familiar narrative. Victims dismissed, their cries for justice ignored, while Donnelly's word was upheld as the ultimate truth. But Alicia was determined to change that. She understood that in the right hands, these complaints could collectively unveil a damning portrait of misconduct and systemic injustice. While she didn't want to escalate things to her superiors just yet, she was fully prepared to pursue the matter as far as necessary to ensure accountability. For the next couple of hours, Alicia immersed herself in her research, driven by a sense of purpose. She reached out to several individuals who had previously filed complaints, introducing herself as a concerned citizen rather than revealing her position within the FBI. The stories she heard were hauntingly similar. Officer Donnelly's demeanor ranged from rude to unnecessarily aggressive, consistently leaving his victims feeling belittled and powerless. It became clear to Alicia that none of these individuals had experienced true justice or been given the support they desperately needed. After concluding her conversations, Alicia leaned back in her chair, allowing a wave of determination to wash over her. This was no longer merely about her grievances. It was about something far larger, about holding people like Donnelly accountable for their actions and ensuring that they could no longer misuse their authority without consequence. Just as she was finalizing her notes, her phone buzzed on the desk, snapping her back to reality. It was Stevens, her trusted colleague. "Hey, any updates?" he asked casually, though Alicia could sense a hint of seriousness beneath his lighthearted tone. "Yeah, I've been digging into his history," Alicia replied, glancing at the screen filled with evidence of Donnelly's past misdeeds. "It's worse than I thought. There are multiple complaints against him from civilians who've had horrific encounters, yet nothing has ever come of it. Each one has been dismissed." "Not surprising," Stevens said with a resigned sigh. "Guys like him know how to navigate the system. They push just enough to intimidate, but they always manage to stay just under the radar of real consequences." "That's exactly what I'm seeing," Alicia agreed, her voice tinged with resolve. But it's going to stop. I've already begun reaching out to some of the complainants, and their accounts are strikingly consistent. We're laying the groundwork for a solid case. You think he's got any higher-ups covering for him? Stevens asked, the tone of his voice shifting to reflect the gravity of their discussion. Alicia paused, considering the implications of his question. It's certainly a possibility, she replied thoughtfully, but I won't let that deter me. We need to gather as much evidence as we can first before making any accusations. With her mind racing, Alicia knew they were on the brink of something significant, an opportunity to challenge the systemic abuse of power and pave the way for justice. I wouldn't be surprised, Alicia replied, her brow furrowing as she considered the implications. But I'm still weighing my options. He's been getting away with this for a long time, though, and from what I can gather, his behavior is becoming increasingly reckless. It's only a matter of time before he crosses a line that will leave him irreversibly exposed. Stevens fell silent for a moment, clearly contemplating her words before he spoke again. Just be careful, Alicia. If he catches wind of your investigation, he could retaliate. Men like him don't take kindly to being unmasked. I understand that, Alicia said, her voice steady and resolute, but I refuse to back down. You never do, Stevens chuckled softly, his tone a mix of admiration and concern. Just keep your wits about you, okay? You excel at what you do, but it's crucial not to get too emotionally involved. We've seen it time and again. Agents who let personal feelings cloud their judgment end up making costly mistakes. I hear you loud and clear, Alicia replied, determination etched in her features. I'll be cautious. After hanging up, Alicia took a moment to digest Stevens' advice. He was right. It was all too easy to let emotions get tangled up in a case, especially one so personally charged. But she was resolute. She would navigate this with clarity and purpose. She was committed to gathering solid evidence, maintaining her composure, and utilizing the system to ensure that Donnelly faced justice for his actions. Her laptop screen flickered to life, displaying a series of profiles belonging to individuals who had filed complaints against Donnelly. Each story was heartbreakingly familiar. Black men and women subjected to harassment for trivial infractions, enduring verbal abuse, humiliation, and, in some instances, being unjustly detained. The pervasive sense of powerlessness against the very system designed to protect them was palpable in their accounts. Alicia took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay focused and calm. She wasn't just fighting for her dignity. She was fighting for every person who had suffered at the hands of officers like Donnelly. She knew that any misstep could jeopardize the investigation. This had to be executed meticulously by the book. After finishing her coffee, she readied herself for the day and headed back to the office. The investigation into Donnelly had consumed her time and energy over the past week, but she understood the necessity of building a robust case, one that would withstand scrutiny in the event of an official review. By mid-morning, Alicia was engrossed in her research when her phone buzzed insistently. It was one of the civilians she had interviewed the day before, James, a man who had been pulled over by Donnelly just a few months prior. "Hey, it's James," he said, his voice somewhat tentative. "I've been mulling over our conversation from yesterday, and there's something that's been bothering me. I wasn't sure if I should bring it up, but it keeps weighing on my mind." Alicia straightened, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" James hesitated as if choosing his words carefully. "When Donnelly pulled me over, he kept making comments that suggested he knew personal details about me, things I never shared. At first, I thought he was just trying to intimidate me, but the more I reflect on it, the stranger it feels. He mentioned my job, my family, details that shouldn't have been in his purview." Alicia's frown deepened. "Did you confront him about how he obtained that information?" "I did," James confirmed, a hint of frustration in his voice, but he just laughed it off. He didn't provide a clear answer. Alicia's mind raced with the implications of his revelation. This wasn't simply about traffic stops or abusing authority. If Donnelly was leveraging personal information to target specific individuals, it represented a far more egregious violation of trust and ethics. She needed to uncover how he was accessing this sensitive data. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, James," Alicia said, her voice firm. "This could be a crucial piece of evidence. I'm going to investigate further. If anything else comes to mind, please reach out without hesitation." After ending the call, Alicia dove back into her research with renewed vigor. She meticulously combed through Donnelly's recent cases, searching for patterns that could reveal his targets. As she sifted through the records, a troubling trend began to emerge. Donnelly appeared to focus on individuals who shared certain characteristics, predominantly African Americans with stable jobs and strong community ties. They were not the typical victims of rogue officers. Why was he singling them out? For hours, Alicia immersed herself in data, trying to connect the dots. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon something even more disturbing. Donnelly was not merely using his position to harass citizens. He was accessing personal records, employment details, home addresses, even medical histories. This was not only illegal but posed serious risks. It explained how he was aware of intricate personal details about people like James, and it raised grave questions about Donnelly's true motives. Her heart raced as the full scope of her findings settled in. This was no longer just about humiliation or authority gone awry. Donnelly was abusing his power in deeply invasive ways, prying into people's private lives without justification. A sudden knock on her office door jolted her from her thoughts. It was Stevens, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "How's it going?" he asked as he stepped inside, immediately sensing the intensity radiating from her. "I found something significant," Alicia said, her voice steady as she turned the computer screen toward Stevens. The glow from the monitor illuminated her determined expression. "Donnelly's been accessing the personal records of individuals he pulls over. This is more than just bad behavior. He's exploiting his position to target specific people, effectively violating their privacy." Stevens raised his eyebrows, the seriousness of her words sinking in. "That's serious. Do you think he's operating alone in this?" "I'm not certain yet," Alicia replied, a hint of frustration creeping into her voice. "But if he's managing this without anyone raising questions, it signals a major breakdown in oversight at the precinct. This isn't just an isolated issue. It could be a systemic problem." Leaning against the desk, Stevens folded his arms, deep in thought. "We need to be cautious with this. If you go in too aggressively, he'll catch wind of our investigation, and we don't want him covering his tracks. We need solid proof before escalating this any further." "I understand," Alicia said, her voice steady but resolute. "But I can't allow him to keep doing this. I'm determined to uncover the full extent of what's happening here." Stevens nodded, his expression serious. "Just be smart about it. We don't want to spook him or alert anyone else to our findings." If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. As Stevens exited the office, Alicia turned back to her computer, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just discovered. She was acutely aware of the risks of pushing too hard, too fast. But every moment she hesitated could mean another victim of Donnelly's abuse of power. She had to tread carefully, balancing the urgency of the situation with the need for stealth. Over the next few days, Alicia immersed herself in her investigation, meticulously gathering evidence while ensuring she remained under the radar. She set up discreet meetings with several more individuals who had filed complaints against Donnelly. Each conversation added another layer to the intricate story she was building. With every testimony, the picture became increasingly clear. Donnelly wasn't just a common bully. He was systematically using his badge to intimidate and control specific individuals within the community. The why still eluded her, but she was inching closer to the truth. One afternoon, after speaking with a woman who had been harassed by Donnelly, Alicia received an unexpected email notification. It was from a contact in the IT department, someone who owed her a favor from a previous case. The message was brief but electrifying. They had traced Donnelly's activity in the system and confirmed that he had accessed personal records without authorization. Alicia's heart raced as she read the email. This was the hard evidence she had been striving for, yet she knew there was still more groundwork to lay before she could bring this situation to a head. Donnelly was engaged in a perilous game, and Alicia needed to ensure she had all the pieces in place before making her move. As she absorbed the implications of her discovery, Alicia felt a sense of urgency intensifying within her. She was getting closer to exposing Officer Donley's full scheme, but there remained an unsettling void of knowledge regarding his motives. Why was he specifically targeting these individuals? What was his endgame? The more she pondered these questions, the more her anxiety deepened. Alicia dedicated hours to reviewing her notes and attempting to connect the dots. Every person she spoke to shared a similar narrative. Pulled over for trivial reasons, humiliated during the encounter, and often left without a clear explanation for their treatment. Yet it was the intimate knowledge Donley seemed to possess about his victims that struck her the most. It felt as though he was selecting targets based on criteria far more intricate than race or social status. One morning, while rifling through her files, Alicia resolved to dig deeper into Donley's background. She had initially avoided this route, hoping to compile enough evidence before delving into his personal history. But now, it felt imperative. She needed to understand who he was before he joined the police force and how he might have developed such a skewed sense of authority. Sitting at her desk, she typed in his name, pulling up old records, her pulse quickening as she anticipated what secrets might be revealed. The search results filled the screen, and Alicia's brow furrowed in concentration. With each click, she unearthed pieces of a puzzle that could hold the key to unraveling Donley's motives. She knew that the path ahead would require both patience and tenacity, but she was ready to confront whatever truths lay in the shadows. What Alicia uncovered was not entirely unexpected, yet it still sent a chill down her spine. Officer Donley came from a long lineage of police officers, with many members of his family having served within the same precinct for generations. His father and grandfather had both worn the badge, and it was abundantly clear that Donley harbored a profound sense of entitlement stemming from this familial legacy. This history seemed to bolster his belief that he was above reproach. However, it wasn't just Donley's family connections that piqued Alicia's interest. As she meticulously perused the records, she stumbled upon several complaints filed against his father, who had retired a decade prior. The allegations were disturbingly similar to those lodged against Donley. Incidents of harassment, racial bias, and abuse of power. It appeared that Donley was perpetuating a troubling family tradition, using the authority granted by his badge to impose control over individuals who might struggle to defend themselves. Alicia leaned back in her chair, the weight of her discovery pressing heavily on her. This situation transcended the misconduct of a single officer. It revealed a pervasive culture of abuse that had been ingrained across generations. The realization struck her with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. Taking down Donley could have far-reaching implications, potentially shaking the very foundations of the department itself. This duality of fear and determination coursed through her veins. Later that day, Alicia reconvened with Stevens to share her findings. They settled into a cozy cafe near their office, the aroma of coffee wafting around them as they prepared to delve into a serious discussion. "I've looked into Donley's background," Alicia began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the topic. "It turns out his father had a history of complaints as well. The same disturbing pattern, racial harassment and abuse of power. It's as if Donley is merely continuing a sinister family legacy." Stevens let out a weary sigh as he took a sip of his coffee. "That doesn't surprise me in the least. I've encountered similar cases before. Officers who operate with an air of invincibility, convinced that their lineage shields them from accountability. They seem to believe the rules simply do not apply to them." "Exactly," Alicia affirmed, her expression serious. "But we need to tread carefully. This issue extends beyond Donley. If we press too hard, we might uncover far more than we anticipate, and I'm not sure how deep this corruption runs." Stevens paused, contemplating her words. "You're right to be cautious, but we can't allow that to deter us. If there's a toxic culture permeating that department, it must be exposed. Our mission isn't solely about Donley. We're challenging a system that enables individuals like him to thrive unchecked." Alicia felt a surge of gratitude for Stevens' unwavering support. She understood that this investigation had the potential to reverberate throughout the community, and she was resolutely committed to seeing it through. She could no longer stand idly by while someone like Donley wielded his power without consequence. Later, as she entered a community center buzzing with activism, She was greeted by the familiar sights and sounds of a passionate movement. Posters demanding justice adorned the walls, and a spirited group was gathered around a table, strategizing for their next protest. Maria, a fierce advocate known for her relentless pursuit of police accountability, approached Alicia with an encouraging smile. "Thanks for coming, Alicia," Maria said, guiding her to a quieter corner of the room. "I've heard about your efforts. What you're doing is truly courageous." Alicia appreciated the sentiment, but felt the immense pressure of her investigation bearing down on her. "I'm just trying to uncover the truth about Donnelly. He's been targeting influential figures in the community, and I suspect it's part of something much larger." Maria's expression shifted, growing serious. "Donnelly is a menace. He wields his badge to instill fear and silence anyone who dares to challenge him. What do you need from me?" Alicia detailed her findings, explaining how Donnelly had been stopping local business owners and interrogating them about their personal lives. "I believe he's gathering information to blackmail or intimidate them into submission. We need to collect evidence of his pattern of behavior and any connections he has within the department." Maria's eyes narrowed, reflecting her determination. "I can assist with that. We've been documenting police encounters throughout the community. If Donnelly's involved, we'll have records of complaints and first-hand testimonies that can support your claims." As they engaged in their conversation, a flicker of hope ignited within Alicia. The prospect of utilizing Maria's extensive resources to piece together the intricate puzzle of corruption seemed tantalizingly close. "Can you get me access to those records?" she asked, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. "Absolutely. I'll reach out to my contacts right away," Maria responded, her determination evident. "But you need to be cautious. Donnelly has eyes everywhere. If he catches wind of what you're investigating, he could retaliate in ways we can't even anticipate." Alicia nodded, acutely aware of the inherent risks that loomed over their efforts. The investigation was intensifying, and she felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "I will be careful. We're on the brink of uncovering something monumental, but I can't let him know that we're onto him." As their discussion drew to a close, Maria handed Alicia a folder brimming with documents. These include testimonies from community members who've had troubling encounters with Donnelly. Go through them, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything else. Alicia exited the community center with a renewed sense of vigor. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to align, but she understood that with each new revelation, the stakes escalated dramatically. Donnelly was more than just a rogue cop. He was entrenched in a corrupt system, and dismantling that system would demand every ounce of her strength and resolve. Over the subsequent days, Alicia and Stevens immersed themselves in the records Maria had provided. They conducted interviews with several individuals, each recounting harrowing tales of intimidation and abuse at the hands of Donnelly. It became increasingly evident that Donnelly was not merely targeting individuals for amusement. He was strategically dismantling anyone who posed a threat to his power. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 5 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. One evening, as they sifted through the documents, Alicia's sense of clarity sharpened. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a troubling pattern emerging in the records. "Donnelly has been pulling over these individuals around the same times, right before significant community events or discussions regarding police accountability. It's almost as if he's trying to send a warning." Stevens leaned in closer, absorbing the implication. "So he's not just attempting to silence them. He's actively working to quash any movements that challenge him." "Exactly," Alicia affirmed, her mind racing with possibilities. "If we can substantiate this connection, it could expose the entirety of his operation. But we need more than just testimonies. We require hard evidence." Their quest for tangible proof morphed into a frantic race against time. They set up surveillance at known locations where Donnelly had previously targeted individuals, hoping to catch him in the act or document his interactions with fellow officers within the department. Days melted into a blur of interviews and late nights. Just when they thought they were making headway, an unexpected setback struck. A leak within the department alerted Donnelly to their investigation. Alicia and Stevens were at their desks when a colleague delivered the disheartening news. "You need to be careful. Donnelly knows you're probing into his affairs, and he's not pleased. Panic surged through Alicia, but she resolved not to let fear dictate their actions. We can't afford to back down now. We have to press forward. Stevens proposed a more cautious approach. If Donnelly is onto us, we need to adapt our strategy. We have to operate underground for a while, working in the shadows until we can gather more evidence without drawing attention. With a shared understanding of the gravity of their mission, they set their minds to work, determined to unveil the truth, no matter the cost. Reluctantly, Alicia agreed to recalibrate their strategy. They shifted their focus to discrete channels for gathering information. As she reached out to trusted contacts in the community, she felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. "Keep your ears to the ground for anything about Donnelly," she urged, knowing full well the risks involved. Amid the chaos, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus, the restaurant owner they had interviewed earlier. "Alicia, you need to come by. I've got something you need to see." His tone was urgent, sending a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. "On our way," she replied, her heart racing as she motioned for Stevens to follow. They hurried to the restaurant, the clamor of the city fading as they entered the familiar space. Marcus stood at the back, his face taut with tension, eyes darting as if the walls might be listening. "I think I have proof of Donnelly's corruption," he said, his voice low and urgent. Alicia's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Marcus led them into his office, the cramped room heavy with the smell of grease and anxiety. He opened a folder, revealing a chaotic collection of documents and photographs. "I've been documenting every interaction with inspectors and city officials since Donnelly pulled me over. Look at these." As they flipped through the pages, Alicia felt a potent mix of fear and exhilaration wash over her. There were records of bizarre inspection reports, emails that dripped with collusion, and damning photographs of Donnelly lurking outside the restaurant during one of the inspections. Each piece felt like a thread pulling tighter around the corruption they were determined to unravel. "This is gold," Stevens breathed, his excitement palpable. But beneath the thrill, Alicia felt a dark shadow creeping in. This evidence could be their lifeline, yet it also put a target on their backs. "We need to be careful," she warned, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "If Donnelly finds out we have this, he won't hesitate to come after us." With a renewed sense of purpose, they began to organize the evidence, every document a step closer to justice, but also a step deeper into danger. They had to present their findings to their superiors, but their minds raced with thoughts of protecting not just themselves, but the community members who had bravely spoken out against a formidable adversary. As Alicia stacked the papers, resolve surged within her. This fight was bigger than exposing one corrupt cop. It was about dismantling a system that allowed abuse to thrive unchecked. She could almost hear the whispers of those who had suffered under Donnelly's reign of terror, and she vowed silently that she wouldn't rest until justice was served. "Let's do this," she said, a fierce determination blazing in her eyes. Together, they would challenge the darkness that had taken root in their community, ready to confront whatever danger lay ahead. In the brightly lit community center where Maria held her meetings, a lively assembly of passionate individuals animatedly exchanged ideas about their upcoming rallies. The air buzzed with contagious energy and unwavering determination, invigorating Alicia with a renewed sense of hope. This was a group of people who refused to be intimidated or silenced. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us," Alicia said as she approached Maria. The middle-aged woman exuded warmth, her welcoming smile coupled with a fierce resolve that sparked confidence in those around her. "Of course, we must band together if we genuinely want to affect change," Maria replied, gesturing for Alicia and Stevens to join her at a nearby table, where an array of notes and flyers lay scattered. Alicia took a deep breath and began detailing their investigation into Officer Donnelly, explaining how he had been targeting both business owners and activists, creating an atmosphere of fear and oppression. As she unfolded the narrative, Maria's expression shifted from one of concern to palpable anger, her brow furrowing as the unsettling details emerged. "Donnelly is merely a symptom of a far larger issue," Maria asserted, shaking her head with frustration. "There are officers in this department who operate under the delusion that they can act with impunity. We've filed numerous complaints against him before, yet nothing ever changes. It's infuriating. Have you ever heard of him trying to gather information on anyone within the community? Stevens inquired, sensing the gravity of the situation. Maria nodded slowly, her expression grave. Absolutely. Time and again, I've witnessed it. He'll pull people over for the flimsiest of reasons and begin interrogating them about their lives. I know several individuals who've been approached about their activism as if he's trying to intimidate them into silence, she explained, her voice tinged with urgency. Alicia felt a chill skitter down her spine. This was not just about a rogue officer misusing his authority. They were grappling with a pervasive culture of fear that stifled voices yearning to be heard. Do you have any concrete examples? Alicia pressed, eager to gather more substantial evidence. Maria hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping as she considered the implications, then leaned in closer. There's a young man named Jamal who was passionately organizing a youth program in the neighborhood. One night, on his way home, Donnelly stopped him and began questioning him about his initiatives, trying to intimidate him. Jamal confided in me later that he felt a deep-seated fear, as if Donnelly was actively searching for a reason to create trouble for him. After that encounter, he abandoned his plans for further events, Maria recounted, her voice thick with empathy. That's exactly the kind of information we need, Stevens said, his tone resolute. If we can persuade Jamal to come forward and share his experience, it could significantly bolster our case. Maria nodded in agreement, her resolve firming. She offered to reach out to Jamal and encourage him to speak with Alicia and Stevens about his encounter. The trio then spent the remainder of the afternoon brainstorming additional potential witnesses and compiling a list of names of those who had suffered similar harassment at the hands of Donnelly. As they began to wrap up their discussion, Alicia's phone buzzed insistently with a text from Stevens. We need to exercise caution. I have a strong feeling Donnelly is keeping tabs on us. Alicia's heart raced at the implication. What do you mean? She asked, her voice edged with concern. I overheard a couple of officers earlier today. They were mentioning something about watching the busybody with the badge, which I suspect refers to you, Stevens replied, his expression serious. A mix of anger and fear surged through Alicia. It was one thing to investigate a corrupt officer, but being threatened directly made the stakes feel alarmingly real. We can't back down now, she declared, steeling her resolve. If we give up, we're only allowing him to win. That evening, as Alicia drove home, her mind whirled with the weight of their mission. She had never imagined she would find herself in such a precarious position, yet a powerful instinct told her they were on the cusp of uncovering something truly monumental. Upon arriving home, she poured herself a steaming cup of tea and settled at her kitchen table, surrounded by her notes and files. As she sifted through the information they had gathered, she began to connect the dots. The more she pieced together the chaotic fragments, the clearer it became that Donnelly represented far more than just a rogue cop. He was a manifestation of the systemic issues plaguing their community. Suddenly, a knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Setting her cup down carefully, Alicia approached the door with caution, peering through the peephole. Relief washed over her when she recognized Stevens standing on her porch. Hey, I wasn't sure if you'd be home, he said, relief evident in his voice as she opened the door. Yeah, we're hoping to uncover some truths about Donnelly, Stevens said, leaning in slightly. Your information could be crucial. Jamal shifted in his seat, the weight of their expectations evident on his face. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. It's just, everything is so tangled up. People are scared. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 6 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Alicia sensed his hesitation, the fear lacing his words. We understand, but keeping quiet won't help anyone. Donnelly's actions are affecting lives, yours included. He looked down at the table, his fingers tapping nervously. I know, but what if he finds out I talked to you? He's got eyes everywhere. That's why we have to be careful, Maria reassured him. We'll make sure you're protected. You won't be alone in this. Jamal nodded, but uncertainty lingered in his eyes. Okay, but I don't know how much I can help. Every bit counts, Alicia said gently. Even small details can lead us to something bigger. Just start wherever you feel comfortable. After a deep breath, Jamal began to share snippets of information, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. I've seen things, deals happening at the old warehouse, late at night. And there's this guy who always seems to be with Donnelly. As he detailed the encounters, Alicia felt the tension shift in the room. This was the breakthrough they needed, but with it came the urgency to act before Donnelly caught wind of their progress. Stevens interjected, "Can you remember any specific dates or names? That could help us piece things together." Jamal hesitated again, then nodded. "Yeah, I can try. Just promise me you'll be careful." Alicia locked eyes with him, her voice steady. "We will. We're in this together." Just then, Alicia's phone buzzed, breaking the charged atmosphere. She glanced down to see a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or else." Her heart raced as she looked up at Stevens and Maria, the weight of the threat settling over them like a dark cloud. "What's wrong?" Stevens asked, noticing her pale face. "I just got a text," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a warning." Maria leaned in closer, concern etched on her face. "What does it say?" Alicia showed them the message, and the room fell silent, the gravity of their situation sinking in. "We have to be smart about this," Stevens said, his expression serious. "We can't let Donnelly intimidate us." Jamal looked between them, fear flickering in his eyes. "What should I do?" "Keep your head down," Alicia advised. "Don't talk to anyone about this, not even your friends. We'll handle it." As they wrapped up their meeting, Alicia felt the storm inside her intensify. The stakes had risen, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were now deeper in the game than ever before. Donnelly was watching, and she was determined not to let fear dictate their next move. Maria held a series of meetings where she was welcomed by a vibrant and passionate group of individuals, all animatedly discussing their plans for an upcoming rally. The air buzzed with energy and unwavering determination, and Alicia felt a powerful surge of hope coursing through her. These were not just ordinary citizens. They were a resilient collective who wouldn't back down easily in the face of adversity. "Thank you for making time to meet with us," Alicia said as she approached Maria, who stood at the center of the gathering. Maria was a middle-aged woman, radiating warmth with her welcoming smile, yet her fierce determination shone through her eyes. She embraced Alicia with open arms, exuding an infectious spirit of camaraderie. "Of course, it's vital that we stick together if we genuinely want to bring about meaningful change," Maria replied, gesturing for Alicia and Stevens to join her at a table surrounded by others who were equally committed to their cause. Alicia took a deep breath and explained their ongoing investigation into Officer Donnelly, detailing how he had been systematically targeting local business owners and activists alike. Maria listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to anger as Alicia laid out the troubling specifics. "Donnelly is merely a symptom of a much larger problem," Maria said, shaking her head in frustration. "There are officers in this department who operate with an alarming sense of impunity, thinking they can do whatever they want without facing any real consequences. We've filed complaints against him multiple times, but nothing ever seems to change. Have you ever heard of him attempting to gather information on anyone within the community?" Stevens interjected, curious about the extent of Donnelly's actions. Maria nodded solemnly, her brow furrowing with concern. "Absolutely. I've witnessed it happen repeatedly. He pulls people over for no valid reason, launching into intrusive questions about their lives. I know several individuals who've been interrogated about their involvement in activism, all to intimidate them into silence." Alicia felt a chill run down her spine at the realization of the gravity of their situation. They weren't just contending with a rogue officer misusing his power. They were confronting an entrenched culture of fear that stifled voices and discouraged dissent. "Do you have any concrete examples of this?" Alicia asked, eager to gather more evidence to strengthen their case. Maria paused for a moment, then leaned forward, her tone serious. "There's a young man named Jamal who was organizing a youth program in our community. One night, Donnelly stopped him on his way home and began probing him about his work, clearly trying to intimidate him. Jamal confided in me later that he felt genuinely frightened, as if Donnelly were searching for any excuse to get him into trouble. After that encounter, he stopped organizing events altogether. "That's exactly the kind of information we need," Stevens said, his voice filled with urgency. "If we can get Jamal to open up, it could significantly bolster our case against Donnelly." Maria nodded in agreement, committing to reach out to Jamal and encourage him to speak with Alicia and Stevens. They spent the remainder of the afternoon brainstorming other potential witnesses and compiling names of individuals who had experienced similar harassment at the hands of Donnelly. As they wrapped up their meeting, Alicia's phone buzzed with an incoming text from Stevens. "We need to be cautious. I have a feeling Donnelly is keeping tabs on us." Alicia looked up, her heart racing in response to the ominous message. "What do you mean?" she asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. "I overheard a couple of officers talking earlier. They mentioned something about keeping an eye on the busybody with the badge, and I suspect they're referring to you," Stevens replied, his expression serious. Alicia felt a tempest of anger and fear welling up inside her. It was one thing to investigate a corrupt officer. It was another to be directly threatened in such a blatant manner. "We can't back down now," she asserted, her voice firm as she tried to rally her resolve. "If we stop now, we're letting him win." That evening, as Alicia drove home, her mind raced with the weight of their mission. She had never imagined she would find herself in such a precarious situation, but the conviction that they were on the brink of uncovering something monumental propelled her forward. Once at home, she poured herself a cup of tea and settled down at her kitchen table, spreading out her notes to review everything they had gathered thus far. The more she pieced together, the clearer it became that Donnelly was more than just a bad cop. He was emblematic of the broader systemic issues that plagued their community. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 7 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at her door. Startled, Alicia set down her cup and approached cautiously. Peering through the peephole, she felt a rush of relief upon recognizing Stevens. "Hey, I wasn't sure if you'd be home," he said as she opened the door, his demeanor a mix of urgency and camaraderie. "Just trying to stay focused. What's on your mind?" Alicia inquired, her heart still racing from the earlier tension. "I wanted to go over our notes again. I believe we're close to uncovering a solid lead, especially with Jamal's potential testimony. But we need to act quickly before Donnelly catches wind of what we're doing," he urged, his intensity matching her own. "Agreed," Alicia replied, feeling a renewed sense of determination surge within her. "Let's go over everything one more time and make sure we're ready to move forward." They meticulously spread out their notes across Alicia's kitchen table, highlighters in hand, tracing connections and patterns that seemed to weave a complex tapestry of their investigation. The air was thick with intensity. With each discussion point they raised, Alicia felt an almost electric tension mounting between them. They were on the verge of uncovering something significant, yet a nagging awareness loomed over them. Donnelly was not a man to be trifled with. If he sensed any threat to his carefully constructed facade, he would not hesitate to take drastic measures to protect himself. As they delved deeper into the evidence, the hours slipped away unnoticed, and the night grew darker around them. Despite their focus, Alicia couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the building and rustle of leaves outside sent her heart racing, amplifying her anxiety. In the dim light of her small apartment, the shadows seemed to stretch longer and loom closer, as if they had a life of their own. "Let's wrap this up for now," Stevens suggested, casting a wary glance at the clock on the wall. The hands had crept toward midnight. "We'll meet with Maria and Jamal tomorrow and see what we can uncover." Alicia nodded, grateful for the reprieve. But as she prepared to close up for the night, a compulsion compelled her to glance out the window one last time. Anxiety surged within her as she caught sight of a police car cruising slowly past her building. The vehicle paused momentarily, its headlights flooding her apartment with an unsettling brightness before it continued down the street and vanished from view. "Did you see that?" Alicia asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with apprehension. "What?" Stevens turned, brow furrowed in concern. "That police car. It just parked outside for a second," she replied, her stomach churning. Stevens frowned, attempting to offer reassurance. It's probably just a routine patrol. Don't let it get to you. You're reading too much into this. But deep down, Alicia couldn't shake the feeling that the timing was too coincidental. The stakes were undeniably rising, and they had to steel themselves for whatever cunning tactics Donnelly might employ next. When the next day dawned bright and clear, a sharp contrast to the turmoil within her, Alicia felt an emotional storm brewing. She and Stevens were scheduled to meet Jamal at the community center, and she sensed that this encounter could alter the course of everything they were working toward. They had to tread carefully. Donnelly was still lurking in the shadows, a predator waiting for any misstep that could put them all in jeopardy. As they drove to the community center, the tension in the car was palpable. Every corner they turned, every passing car felt like a potential threat, each noise amplifying her unease. Just stick to the plan, she reminded herself, trying to maintain her focus amidst the growing anxiety. Upon their arrival, they spotted Maria waiting for them at a corner table, her demeanor resolute as she waved them over. "Jamal is running a bit late," she informed them, her tone calm yet imbued with seriousness. "He's feeling a little nervous about talking to you." "We understand," Stevens replied, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. Trust is hard to come by for him, especially with someone like Donnelly in the mix. Alicia nodded in agreement. "We're here to help. Whatever he chooses to share will remain confidential. We just want to ensure his safety." Just then, the doors swung open and Jamal entered, glancing around with an expression that betrayed his uncertainty. When his gaze landed on Maria, he made his way toward their table, visibly tense. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks for coming." "Jamal," Maria responded, her smile warm and encouraging. "We're here to listen. No pressure at all." As Jamal took a seat, he looked from Alicia to Stevens with a mix of apprehension and curiosity, weighing his options. "I heard about what you're trying to do," he began slowly, his voice thick with hesitation. "But I'm scared. Donnelly has a way of making people disappear, you know? It's not just talk." Alicia leaned forward, her expression earnest and steady. "We understand your fear, and we're not here to put you in any danger. Our goal is to gather the information we need so we can hold him accountable for his actions." He paused, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Finally, he sighed and said, "Okay, I'll share what I can, but you have to promise me that this won't get back to him. I can't risk my safety." "Absolutely," Stevens assured him, leaning in slightly. "Your safety is our top priority. We're in this together." As Jamal began to speak, Alicia leaned in, her attention fully captured by his words. He recounted a chilling experience from a time when Donnelly had pulled him over for a seemingly minor traffic violation. What should have been a simple interaction had swiftly morphed into an intense interrogation. "He asked me about my friends and what I was doing in the neighborhood. It felt like he was trying to scare me into silence," Jamal recounted, his voice trembling slightly as he recalled the encounter. Alicia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was precisely the kind of intimidation they had feared. Donnelly wasn't merely a corrupt cop. He was systematically instilling fear within the community, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and distrust. Jamal elaborated on the impact this had on his life, explaining how he had ceased organizing his youth programs because he felt constantly watched, isolated, and threatened. "I didn't want to bring trouble to my family," he confessed, his eyes downcast, revealing the weight of his burden. With every detail Jamal shared, Alicia's resolve only strengthened. They needed to escalate their efforts, gather more testimonies, and build a case robust enough to withstand any scrutiny. "Jamal, do you have any idea how many others he's done this to?" she inquired, her voice steady yet urgent. He paused, pondering the question, his brow furrowed in thought. "There are others, but they're scared too. They think if they speak up, they'll face serious consequences." Maria interjected, her voice fierce and resolute. "That's why we need to rally the community. If we can show that this is happening to many people, we can start to change things. We can't let fear silence us any longer." As they continued to talk, an idea began to blossom in Alicia's mind, gaining clarity and urgency. What if we organized a community meeting? We could invite others who have had similar experiences and create a safe space for them to share their stories and support one another. That could work, Stevens replied, his eyes lighting up with a spark of excitement. If we can gather enough people, we can put pressure on the department to investigate Donnelly properly and ensure he's held accountable for his actions. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 8 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Jamal looked uncertain, glancing around the room as if assessing the risks of such a bold move. I want to help, but I don't know if I can face him again. The thought of him coming after me terrifies me. Just remember, you're not alone in this, Alicia said, her voice steady and reassuring. We're all in this together. The more people who come forward, the stronger our case will be. Together, we can stand against him. As they discussed logistics, a palpable sense of determination filled the air, transforming their anxiety into action. They set a date for the community meeting, hoping to attract as many people as possible who could share their stories. Jamal agreed to help spread the word, and as their discussion wrapped up, Alicia felt a glimmer of hope emerge from the depths of her uncertainty. Yet, as they left the community center, her anxiety crept back in. They had set a plan into motion, but the shadow of Donnelly remained an ever-present threat. During the drive back, Alicia glanced at Stevens, who was lost in thought, his expression serious. "What are you thinking?" she asked, breaking the silence. "I just hope we're ready for what's coming," he replied, his brow furrowing deeper. "Donnelly won't take this lying down. He'll fight back, and I worry about what that could mean for all of us." That night, as Alicia prepared for bed, her mind raced with thoughts and scenarios. The community meeting loomed ahead, filled with the potential for both change and danger. She double-checked the locks on her doors, glancing out the window to ensure no one was lurking in the shadows. As she climbed into bed, exhaustion finally overtook her, and she drifted off to sleep, her dreams haunted by the faces of those they were fighting for. The following morning, she would rise to face whatever challenges awaited them, determined to uncover the truth about Donnelly and to stand firm against the tide of intimidation that threatened their community. Little did they know, Donnelly was already aware of their plans. He was not the type to let things slide, especially not when his reputation was on the line. When the day of the community meeting finally arrived, excitement buzzed in the air. People gathered in the center, sharing their experiences and forming a network of support that felt both empowering and necessary. When it was Jamal's turn to speak, he stepped up, his hands trembling but his voice gradually finding steadiness as he recounted his story. Others followed suit, revealing their encounters with Donnelly, each narrative adding significant weight to their cause. As the atmosphere grew electric with shared determination and unity, a police cruiser pulled up outside. A hush fell over the crowd as Donnelly stepped out, a smug and menacing look etched on his face. "What's going on here?" he shouted, attempting to instill fear into the gathering. Alicia felt her heart race, adrenaline surging through her, but she stood tall, determined not to back down. "We're here to talk about accountability," she declared, rallying the crowd with her unwavering resolve. In that moment, with the community united around her, Alicia realized that fear would not win today. Together, they stood against Donnelly, ready to fight for their rights and demand justice for their neighborhood. The lines had been drawn, and though the struggle had only just begun, Alicia felt a surge of strength knowing they had each other. That was more powerful than any badge or weapon. They would not back down. They were ready to confront whatever came next. As we wrap up this powerful story of Alicia Carter, we're reminded of the importance of standing up against injustice and the necessity of perseverance in the face of adversity. What have you learned from Alicia's experience? We encourage you to reflect on one thing you can bring into your own life to foster change and promote understanding. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to leave your comment and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more impactful stories.